But with that being said, since this whole thing started about me botching up the life system discussion that I wanted to have, or at least what I wanted to say during it, I'd like to take another crack at it and just go about it once again. And so here's the thing about live systems in video games: that while they are an archaic form of design, and while they do in a sense hamper the player's ability in some cases and can inhibit their enjoyment of a game depending on how difficult something is, a live systems really come into their own because of that difficulty. And what I mean by that is that they basically promote system mastery by forcing the player to play good and by retrying the level as many attempts as they want. Well, not as many attempts as they want, but in as much attempts as they can that they have lives for. And this is an interesting thing because the game is trying to cultivate a specific play style out of you. Now, last time I mentioned Mega Man Zero, which, was something that I really wanted to talk about, and how in taking on a live system, my playstyle changed entirely. So when I played Mega Man Zero for the first time, I played it like Mega Man X. I was dashing everywhere. I was, trying to shoot everything. That's not how the game wants to be played. You have to play the game a lot more carefully because Zero does not have a lot of life to lose in Mega Man Zero. However, similar to X, you can gain upgrades for it through the Cyber Elves. I'll get to that in a little later on, but for the most part, you have the base health that you have throughout the game. And in order to make sure that you don't bite the dust early, you have to learn how the game wants you to play it. And how it wants you to play it is actually pretty similar to a regular Mega Man game. When I say regular Mega Man, I mean pre-X, in a sense. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not nearly as, for lack of a better term, slow as classic Mega Man, but it is more so intentional because, again, you don't have much life to lose. So in that case, you have to be much more, for lack of a better term, intelligent. I don't have the correct word to say right now, but intentional, there we go, thank you. You have to be much more intentional about where you're going, what you're moving to, and when you decide to dash. Otherwise, you're just going to lose health and eventually lose your life. And so the life system kicks in by getting the player to not be as impulsive. You have to make your movements count. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to study bosses in order to make sure that you don't get fried in any attempts you make. And I was noticing this about my playstyle, was that how much more intentional I got and how I was encouraged to learn the game design. Now, granted, this is something that was also cultivated through the checkpoint system, because without it, I would not have been able to get through the game in the first place. And for as much as I would love to champion the live system, like, true 100%, like, I would not have gotten through Mega Man Zero without there just being that checkpoint system, because it was that hard for me as, baby's first Mega Man game. Now, well, not first Mega Man game, but first 2D Mega Man game. Yeah, that's more accurate of me to say. Now, with that being said, because of the checkpoint system, it did make a double-edged sword where I wasn't learning the game because I could face roll into a wall, and the game would accept that as, acceptable. And because of that, it really wasn't a very good way to learn the game, despite it making the game 100% more feasible for me to play. Oh man, I'm getting hit. But with that being said, because of the because of the life system, something else that I noticed about it was it gave me a much more accurate gauge of my skill at the game. And that's something that I don't feel like a checkpoint system can really help at. Now, of course, people are gonna throw out the Souls games and whatever other games they have up their sleeves, where they have a checkpoint and they're able to gauge their skill by how little they die. And while the concept is pretty similar in the case of a live system game, something that is really brought out by having traditional lives is the fact that how clean, I guess I can make it look, for lack of a better term. Hold on one second. Let me collect my thoughts. So what I mean by this is that in a checkpoint system game, after a certain period of time, you're not keeping score of how many lives you lost, like straight up, because if a challenge is that challenging, you stop paying attention however many attempts, probably after like number 10, right? But in a live system game, you have that number hanging over you from beginning to the end of the game. And in that, you were able to make a much more clean assessment of how much you were improving by seeing how much lives you have from your last playthrough and how much you have in this playthrough. And that was something that I took as... what's the word I'm looking for? I took as an interesting bit of... like a gauge. Thank you. I took it as an interesting gauge to see how much I learned and how much I improved. And this wasn't even in a game like Mega Man Zero. This was in something like Sonic Mania, which for my first playthrough, I got creamed in that game. I got game over after game over. I was all over the place. I was not going fast, and I had a time because in reality, that was like my second 2D Sonic game after Sonic the Hedgehog 1. And, I hadn't learned those lessons that I should have with the other Genesis games. But in coming back to Sonic Mania again and again and again and again, I was able to now build up the skills, that I needed in order to actually beat the game without losing that many lives. In fact, my recent playthrough, I had beaten the game on 19 lives. Would have been more, but I got, bamboozled by the secret final boss who I kind of forgot was in the game. And, it is what it is. You lose a life. That just means you have more learning to do when it comes to that particular thing. But in that case, too, I also think, this is kind of... wait a minute. All right, well, this next bit that I wrote down doesn't exactly flow into anything else, like, consistently, but, sometimes, and this I learned a bit in fighting games, too, was that, sometimes when something frustrating comes up, that you might be asking the wrong question as to, why this thing is the way that it is. I mentioned before that the reason that the live system exists is to curtail a player into a specific play style. And, that's not necessarily the most fun thing in the world to hear, that you have to play the game this way, and if you don't, you get smacked down in the face for it. But, when the gameplay clicks, like, it really, when it clicks, it just feels great. And learning to play it the way it was intended to be played is also just fun, in a sense. And the only real game that I have as an example for this is the original Mario Bros. So... recently, maybe earlier this year, I was playing Super Mario 1 for the first time on the All-Stars collection thing. And I was a Sonic kid, and I did not grow up with Mario. And so because of that, I was struggling with this game. Well, I was struggling when I got to World 6. Worlds 1 through 5, I was flying through it. In fact, you could tell that I was a Sonic kid because I was just going. But I got to World 6, and then everything slowed down. And I died, and I died some more, but I made some progress, and then I died, and then I made some progress, and then it was a constant cycle of that. But something that stuck out in my mind while this was happening was, first of all, the Hammer Brothers, because they're really annoying to fight. However, they are a really well designed enemy, and I don't think that many people talk about how well designed they are, because they bring one of Mario 1's best qualities to the forefront, and how intentional you have to be with your movement. So what I mean by this is Hammer Brothers are defeated in two ways. Either you jump over them or you run under them, but either way you choose, it requires you to have enough speed to do the task. If not, you're just going to lose a life and restart the stage. But in restarting the stages enough times, I was able to realize that, I was able to pick up on their patterns and then dodge them all together in a way that, made them seem like they weren't much of a threat, even though I spent a day on World 8, what was it? World 8 1, 8 2, 8 3, whatever one is just lined to the brim with Hammer Brothers. But nevertheless, it was something that, after a while clicked. And when it clicked, I was able to make this seamless looking series of jumps and avoidance of the Hammer Brothers, and it was amazing. And then the other thing that I noticed was that, if I was losing a life, it's because I did not understand something that was happening in the world. And that thing in particular that I highlighted was World 8-1 to 8-2. So in World 8-1, there is a series, there's a land, and there are gaps in the land, but you can run over the gaps. However, I never knew that you could just run over the gaps, or at least I didn't know you could run over the gaps after you stopped running. Say I was running and then I dodged something with a jump and then I stood still on another platform, I didn't know I can continue to run over the gaps that were still ahead of me. I thought I had to have a specific level of speed in order to do that. So when I got to World 8-2, there was this pipe, and there were two more gaps, and then this big jump. So I didn't understand how to make the jump because I thought that I didn't have enough speed to make the jump. And long story short, I did, but I had to keep replaying 8-1 because the lesson didn't sink in. I got past 8-1 without realizing this, and in my opinion, it's stuff like that that actually makes the live system worthwhile, is because it's not, it is meant to punish you for playing bad, but it's also meant to teach you about the aspects of the game that you've yet to understand. And that's what I personally got from both the Hammer Brothers and World 8-2. And, that wasn't the cleanest explanation I could give, yeah, but, that's particularly what I wanted to say last time about the live system and why I think it has a lot of value, is that it can teach you things about the game that you've yet to understand, and it could also just, highlight some really good design that the developers had put in, that, everyone I heard of they swear up and down the street about the Hammer Brothers, but even though I do too find them annoying, I still think that they are a really interesting enemy that, promotes the intentionality that you have to have in Mario, or at least in completing a level in Mario.